What a joy it is for me to be in Plano, Texas today with my friend Gerald Brooks. Gerald and his wife Jenny have been friends of Margaret and mine for now quite a few years. This is a very exciting church here, and we're doing the Enjoy Life Club in his setting. He's the senior pastor of Grace Outreach Center, started it in 1982, runs 2,600 people now, strong ministry with children and youth. And it's an exciting place. In fact, I was greatly privileged to be here and preach the dedication message for Gerald and Jenny and their people. Boy, what a wonderful day that was. I'll never forget it. I don't get to do a lot of that stuff anymore, and to be able for Margaret and me to come in and just spend a Sunday with them was wonderful. The people were so kind, so receptive. Gerald has a wonderful ministry also with pastors. When I did a conference, a couple of conferences called Challenge 1000, as you know, that were there, many of the speakers I had across the country were pastors who had started their churches and taken them past 1,000. And so I let them speak, kind of be the models, and Gerald was one of the speakers. And God kind of used that as a launching pad for his ministry to pastors, and he's just helped so many. In fact, Gerald, one of the things I appreciate about you, so many things, but one of the things I appreciate about you very much is your heart for pastors. I mean, you really love them, you really care for them, and you really want to help make them successful, and you're doing a great job in it. Several pastors are here in the room. Not only is Gerald's staff here, but several pastors here from Texas. In fact, one pastor is from, now you're going to have to tell me, what was the name of this town? This is a Texas town name I've ever heard of. What is it?
Gun Barrel City.
Gun Barrel City, Texas. Gun Barrel City, Texas, where they always shoot straight, huh? What do you do? Every Sunday morning you get up with, and say, I'm going to give you another straight shooting sermon here. You know what I mean? Whoa. I mean, if that isn't you just want to salute a guy from there, don't you, hi? Or put both hands up and surrender, you know what I'm saying? Or, take me, I'm yours, or give them your money. You want to do something with somebody from a town like that. And a lot of other pastors here, which I'm not going to take time to mention, except Blair Ritchie's here, and Blair's a wonderful friend of mine. We go back many, many years ago, too, and he's building a great church also in Plano, and is district superintendent for the Wesleyan churches here in the state. So, Blair, good to see you, and good to see all of you. And the lesson today is entitled, God Gracious Gifts to Leaders. God has given gracious gifts to men and women in leadership positions, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Kind of as an intro to get into this lesson, though, there have been 4 phases, I think, of my life. And I'm going to give you 4 words that probably describe the 4 different periods of my life as I look back on them. At the age of 21, I think the word there that I would describe my beginning parts of my ministry would be the word burning. I had a hot heart for God. I had a passion and a burning within me to build a great church. Didn't know how to build a great church. I don't know how passionate you can be about building a great church in a place like Hillham, Indiana, with 11 houses and 2 garages and 1 country store. But my heart was burning, and for the first 10 years of my life, I can just say I was on fire. I want to get something accomplished for the glory of God. And, I'm so glad for that being the first phase of my life, because I learned back then that passion will take you places where giftedness won't take you. I learned that a hot heart for God is more important than a great talent for God. I learned in that first period of my life that if your heart burns for God, you'll build a great work. What was it? John Wesley said, catch on fire and the people will come and watch you burn. Isn't that right, huh? And so the first 10 years, the word to describe my life would be burning. And the second 10 years, at the age of 31, I think the word I would use there would be the word learning. I was learning a lot. I mean, I was going to every conference I could go to, speaking to every pastor that I could speak to, reading every book that I could read, listening to every tape I could listen. I couldn't get enough. And it seemed like everything I got, I needed more. And in fact, the more that I learned, the more that I knew I needed to learn. And the more I realized I didn't know enough. And it just created an incredible appetite to keep on learning about God and about leadership and pastoring, the whole process. And at age 41, I probably entered in phase 3, which is the word I would describe that phase as the word earning. I was starting to receive some good things happening in my life as a response to what I had planted early in my life. It was at age 41 that I realized that if you pay on the front end, you can play on the back end. And I don't mean play in a frivolous way. I'm not talking about goofing off and slacking off. Hopefully my heart was as hot for God at 41 as it was 21. But what I mean by that is all of a sudden you start to earn a little bit of respect. You're starting to see your church grow. Here's the way I put it. In the beginning of my ministry, I probably worked harder but got less credit than I deserved. But what happens is if you do it right on the front end, there comes a time when you say, wait a minute, I don't deserve this. This is getting better than what I ever had. It compounds. Fruitfulness compounds. A lot of things begin to compound. Blessings begin to compound. And you just sit there and say, wow, I don't deserve this. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful way to live your life. And I'm very grateful for that. And then now that I'm 51, I think I'm in maybe the fourth phase of my life. And the word there I would put down is discerning. And I did put hopefully behind that because I want to qualify this discernment. I'm learning, and I'm talking now about wisdom. I'm talking now about seeing things totally different at 51 than I would have ever seen them at 31. And the reason I'm giving you this is because in a moment I'm going to share with you something that I've really, in the last few years, really began to pick up and learn, and some wisdom I think the Lord has begun to give me. But there's a passage in your notes that out of James 1:5. I've got the message here in your notes that I read or think or pray this passage every day. I've read or prayed or thought this passage every day for 30 years. If somebody say, what verse of Scripture do you go to the most? It'd be this verse right here. If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. You'll get His help and won't be condescended to when you ask for it. Ask boldly, believingly, without a second thought. Well, that's the passage where James says, if you lack wisdom. We're kind of used to that phraseology a little bit more. If you lack wisdom, let that person ask about it, and God will give it to that person liberally. Well, over the years, since I'm hopefully in a more of a discerning stage of my life, over the years, one of the things that I have really learned is that God is very gracious to people in leadership positions. Now, I know that sounds a little trite because God's gracious to everybody. But I want you to think of this for a moment. I want you to think of the fact that in the graciousness of God, when He calls a Christian leader, beyond the grace that all of us experience and all the other things, if God is calling a leader, the graciousness of God to give that leader a dream and a vision and a passion, the stuff that the leader needs, quote, to pull off the plan that God has for him or her. All of a sudden, it's really begun to hit me that almost everything that I have in my life is because God has incredibly blessed me and perhaps gifted me in the area of leadership. It's kind of a humbling deal. And to give the right platform for this lesson today, I was asked, there's a movie coming out on December 17th called The Prince of Egypt. It's a Steven Spielberg movie. I don't know if you've seen the previews of it, but it's an animated movie that Spielberg and Katzenberg and the guys at DreamWorks put together because Spielberg says the greatest story ever told is the story of Moses taking the children of Israel out of Egypt. And this is a phenomenal deal. What they've done with this, I am very excited about it. I was privileged to go out to DreamWorks out in Los Angeles and spend a day with them because they gave the book rights of this movie to Thomas Nelson, my publisher. And they wanted a Christian publishing company to have the book rights to this movie so that they said the movie's going to cause people to ask all kind of questions. And they wanted because they knew Christians would really value the biblical account of Moses and the children of Israel. So they gave the rights of the book. And in fact, the book, I've got it in your notes there. Destiny and Deliverance is the name of the book. And it'll be out By the time you receive this tape, that book will be out by Thomas Nelson, and if you want to get it from Enjoy, you can just call us and we'll send it to you. What's interesting about the book is Thomas Nelson asked 8 of us authors to write a chapter of the book, and I was asked to write a chapter, and in fact, I asked him in the office to give me the chapter titles the other day because the book's not quite yet in print. By the time you get the tape, it will be out. Tommy Barnett has done a chapter called The Faithfulness of God in Keeping His Promises. Jack Hayford did a chapter called The Day of Which a World Turned. Johnny Erickson Tata did We Say No, God Says Yes. And that's typical of our life, isn't it? And Max Lucado has one called, I can hardly wait to read this chapter, The Voice from the Mop Bucket. Sounds like a Max Lucado title, doesn't it, huh? And and Philip Yancey is doing one entitled Moses, Prince of Israel, and they asked me to do one. And they really let us select our own subject, but it had to be on the life of Moses, obviously, because that's off the movie. So what they did is they let us preview the movie, went out there and saw it, which was incredible. The creativity to go into this movie is huge. When they put Moses in the water in the movie, they show him going down the Nile, and they show like a crocodile about to get to grab and eat the boy in the basket, and the water pushes the basket away from the crocodile, and it shows Moses going down through kind of rough waters, and God finally the basket is safely into Pharaoh's pool, where they of course bring him out, and Spielberg said in writing that piece, that movie, that he wanted to show the moviegoer that when God calls a leader, that nothing can harm that leader until God's purpose is fulfilled in that life. Man, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, boy, I wish we as pastors would put the creativity in a message that they can put into a movie. In The Burning Bush, Val Kilmer plays Moses, and in The Burning Bush, when they want to know who should be the voice in this burning bush. And they tried Charlton Heston, that seems to be the person to try, don't you think? That's just kind of, he has the God voice, you know what I'm saying? When we get to heaven, if God doesn't sound like Charlton Heston, we're going to be disappointed, aren't we? But what voice should we use? And, that whole process. And then all of a sudden it hit them that they ought to use Val Kilmer's voice. So in The Burning Bush, when God speaks to Moses, Val Kilmer, it's his voice. And the reasoning was, listen to this is powerful. It said, think about it. When you hear the voice of God in your life, you hear God's voice in your voice. And I thought how true that is. That's how we hear God. We hear God speak to us in our voice. And it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful movie. Pastors, as you're listening to this tape, if I were you, I would in December, I know it's getting close to Christmas, maybe in January, I would preach a couple messages on the life of Moses. It's just a natural. Your people will be going to see this movie. It's a natural feed in. But the reason I'm telling you the story and the Prince of Egypt is the chapter that I wrote was this chapter on gifts to leaders. And I'm going to give you some of it today. I'm going to give you some of the chapters of the chapter, and I thought this would make a wonderful Enjoy Life Club lesson. So I'm going to share with you 9 things, 9 gifts that God gives leaders. Number 1, when God chooses a leader, He gives that leader an emotional investment in the work. In other words, when God chooses somebody to lead, He gives them an emotional investment in the work so that their heart is attached to what they are called to do. And so let me just define emotional investment for a second. Letter A, an emotional investment means my heart is in the work. And when God chooses a leader to do a great work, there's got to be the heart there. An emotional investment means I know this work inside and out. An emotional investment means I have given my time and resources to this work. I I don't own the work owns me. Does that make sense? I mean, everything you've got, you're going to put into it. I mean, you give up your time, you give up your money, you give up everything you can to see this work really become the work that God planted and planned within your own heart. An emotional investment means I can do nothing else. In other words, there aren't options in life for me to kind of like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll go do something else. People ask me all the time, they'll say, John, well, if you weren't doing ministry, what would you do? I look at them and say, well, what would I do? I don't have a clue what. I can't imagine myself doing anything else but doing this full time for the Lord. I mean, it's the only thing I know. It's the only thing. It's not only the only thing I know. It's the only thing I want to do. And when God calls a leader, there's an emotional investment that God gives that leader for that work. See, that's what keeps us going during the tough times. That's what gives us a second wind. That's what allows us to keep on keeping on when everybody else is checking out. Yes. That's what causes people to look at us and not understand us. You know what I mean? They look at you and they'll say, why would you be doing this? Now, see, they're looking at us and saying, why would you do this work? And we're looking at them and saying, why wouldn't you do this work? It's the difference between an emotional investment and a person that's got everything in it and a person that's got basically nothing in it, just as an observer saying, why do they do what they do? Okay. Well, Moses, of course, is going to be our example the whole time. And just one paragraph from the book, it's in your notes. Some 40 years later, when God called him to be the redeemer of the Hebrew slaves, Moses had a deep emotional investment in the cause. The people he would seek to lead and liberate were not some unknown group. They were his people. He had seen firsthand the abuse that they had suffered. He had heard their cries for help echoing in his ears for almost half a century. He finally came to the point that, if need be, he was willing to lay down his own life for their liberation. That's an emotional investment. In my own life, I can think back in 1976 when I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God called me to spend the rest of my life with pastors. And didn't know where it was going to end up, had no idea. I could not do a goal-setting seminar with credibility. Where I am today, are you kidding me? For me to tell somebody how to set goals, everything I've got in my life is so much bigger, better than I would have ever anticipated. My biggest goal when I was a kid was to pastor a church of 500 people. I mean, if I could have done that, I thought I'd die happy and go home and see Jesus. And if I could have done that, I would have died happy and gone home seeing Jesus. But little did I know in 1976 when God gave me a call to pastors that I'd be able to pastor for 25 years. And all that was my, just as Moses went out in the desert, that was my time of getting the emotional investment in there and realizing this is the love of my life. And people say, what's changed now that you're not a senior pastor? Nothing's changed, except if there's anything's changed, I get more time to work with pastors. And my heart has gotten bigger for pastors. So, if there's a change. Now, let me give you an example of an emotional investment, though, because I want to make sure we have it, and then I'm ready to go to number 2. Because of the leadership stuff that I teach, and the books and the tapes and all that, not only do I have a lot of invitations to speak in the Christian world, especially the church world, local church world, but increasingly over the last 4 or 5 years, I've had a huge amount of requests to speak into the corporate world. And that was kind of an exciting thing for me at the beginning. I thought, this will stretch me. I'll get into a world that I don't know very well. I know leadership, and it was interesting to me that they would be saying, coming over to our world and picking me out and say, come over here and teach us and do that whole deal. And so it was an interesting experience. And I've done stuff for Sam's Club, Walmart. This weekend I'm going to be with Ed Emma, who's the president of Jockey, and so I've got to allow me to. In fact, he's allowed me to do as much as I want. In fact, what's interesting now, if I really wanted to, I could do nothing but corporate work. Now, here's what's interesting. Now, here's where the emotional investment comes in. Instead of doing more in the corporate community, I'm doing less, and it's not because it's not. I think I'm helping them. Let's put it this way: they keep asking me to come back, and the invitations keep increasing. But when I teach leadership, which is my love, when I teach leadership in the corporate world, when I get done, they give me a standing ovation and a big check. But I walk away and I say, so what? Now, I'm not trying to be demeaning in any way, because I love business, I love businessmen, and I want people to do well financially. So it's not. But when I'm done, I'm saying, okay, I made better leaders for a company or for a corporation. But I mean, to be honest with you, when it's all said and done, that's wood, hay, and stubble. And you know what I found? I'm finding, in fact, as we're getting ready to partner with pastors to a greater degree in 1999 than we ever have at Enjoy, what I'm finding is when I leave a leadership conference where I'm with church leaders. In fact, as today I'm going to be at Prestonwood, Jack Graham's church, and we'll have 1,000+ leaders I'll be teaching for the next day and a half. And you know what? When I go down there and I speak to church leaders and pastors and parachurch organizations that are Christian organizations, when I get done there, I'm so fulfilled, because that's my life. That's what I gave my life for, to build great preachers and to build great leaders and to build great churches. Now, when I walk away from that, I'm saying, yes, I was born for this. When I walk away from the corporate community, I say, that was nice. There's a lot of difference between that was nice and I was born for this. And so I've made a major decision about 4 months ago. I told the Enjoy people, I said, look, I'll still do a few. I'll do, if I can fit it in once in a while, I'll do a corporate deal. But I said, to be honest with you, let's focus. Let's stay right in the church world. Let's stay right there, because it's the pastors that need the help, and it's the pastors. But that's where my joy. That's who I am. That's what I know. That's what I love. That's an emotional investment in the work. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Number 2. When God chooses a leader, He affirms that leader through others. There is an affirmation process that others give that leader that basically tells that leader that what they're doing is the thing that they ought to be doing. In Exodus 4:18, the person whom Moses tells about his encounter is Jethro. Then Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, let me go back to my own people, to Egypt, to see if any of them are still alive. And Jethro said, go, and I wish you well. That was big, because a little bit later we're going to find out that Jethro was a mentor to Moses. That was big for the mentor of Moses to say, hey, I think you're doing a good thing there. I want to wish you well as you go back there. Got a tough assignment, but I just want to affirm you. Moses, I think you're ready. I think with God's help, you can pull this off. I have a wonderful friend that I love having conversations with. His name is Bob Beal. And Bob's just a good buddy, and he's the kind of person, every time I can grab an hour with him, we grab an hour and a lunch or something, and I just ask him questions, because I think he's got a lot of wisdom, and he's helped me a lot. Anyway, one of Bob Beal's favorite things, if you ever talk to him much or listen to him much, is he'll ask you, if you ever, in an hour conversation, I'll guarantee you, Bob Beal will ask you this question. He'll ask you, tell me about your 4th grade experience. The first time he did that, I told him about my 4th grade experience. I told him about my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Tacey. Oh, I loved her. She was a wonderful lady. And how that she affirmed me, and my 4th grade was one of my favorite years of all of my school. It drives my wife Margaret crazy that I can remember all of my school teachers' names. But I can remember every school teacher I think that I ever had going up through school. And Mrs. Tacey, I can remember it was in the 4th grade that she affirmed my leadership. She said, John, one day, I came in from the playground. She said, John, I noticed on the playground, everybody follows you. If you're over on the jungle gym, all the kids go to the jungle gym. She said, they all follow you. And she said, I think you're a wonderful young leader. Now, the reason I'm telling you that story, I'm talking about affirmation. Just the other day, I was so surprised. I received a note from my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Tacey. I haven't seen her since I was in the 4th grade that I know of. So that's, which was 2 or 3 years ago. So I don't know. How old are you in the 4th grade? What are you, 10? Something like that. So at 30 years, it's been probably 30 years. But anyway, excuse me, 40 years. Yeah, 51 to be 40 years. Thank you. Gerald will always remind me. So I haven't seen Mrs. Tacey for 41 years, but she she had read my book, The Success Journey. So she finds out where I am, and so she writes me this wonderful handwritten note. And she says, I can remember you well in my 4th grade at Franklin Street School. Now, so this is 40 years ago. She's had a lot of kids. Let me say this. She could remember me well because, well, I'll tell you what she says, and then let me tell you reality. She says, I can remember you well in my 4th grade at Franklin Street School because your friendliness, your positive attitude, and your excellent work were well appreciated. And then she goes on and tells me a couple more things. Now, in fact, she sent me a picture of her with her little 4th grade class and the whole deal. And this is kind of a prized possession of mine. I get a note from your 4th grade teacher who read one of your books. Now, the reason she remembers me well was because I was always talking. I knew she liked me well. I could tell I was kind of like her teacher's pet. I knew that. But I drove her crazy because I never quit talking. Never quit talking. You have to understand. In fact, one day she came and she brought me up, and I can remember the rest of the kids were doing something in their desk, and she brought me and said, John, we have to talk. She said, you deserve an F in conduct. She said, you never shut up. She said, you just never are quiet. And she says, I know that your parents will come and see me if I give you an F in conduct. Now, I was getting straight A's in the class. And she says, but I've got to send a message. So she says, I'm going to give you a C- in conduct. And I'm going to put it in red. That lets you know you really deserved an F. That was my first lesson on God's grace. And she gave me, I got straight A's. I got straight A's for the 6 weeks. And I got now how can you do this? I got straight A's in all my subjects. I got a C in effort. How can you get straight A's and be a C in effort and a C- in red in conduct? Of which when my dad saw the C- in conduct, he went to see Mrs. Tacey. And he says, what can we do? She looked at my dad and says, you can do nothing. She said, he doesn't have the ability to be quiet. She said the other day I put him in the coat room, and she said 6 kids came back and had visiting rights with the boy back there. He's conducting leadership back in the coat room while I'm in here doing a class. She said, you just can't have me. She says, I tell him to be quiet. He says, I'll do my best. He looks at me now. He says, he's lying to me, and turns around and starts talking again. And so anyway, it was a spiritual gift of mine, okay? But what I remember so much about Mrs. Tacey was the incredible affirmation. The incredible affirmation that she gave me. It's the same thing I remember about my 7th grade Sunday school teacher, Glenn Leatherwood. When he looked at me one day in a Sunday school class and asked to see me and Phil Conrad and Junior Fowler and Steve Benner afterwards, and told us that he saw and sensed the call of God in our life, and prayed over me in a basement on East Ohio Street in Circleville, Ohio, as a 7th grade kid, and laid his hand on me and gave me what I've always considered to be my official ordination into the ministry. It's the same affirmation that a professor by the name of Mr. Brown, in my senior year of college, when I finished preaching in the senior class chapel, and he scribbled out a note and handed it to me on the way out of the chapel that day, that basically said, John, as I listened to you preach today, I sense the hand of God upon you in an unusual way, which says to me that God's going to use you in an unusual way. Affirmation. You see, when God chooses a leader, he brings people around that affirm the direction of that leader. Now, to affirm is to make firm. In other words, when you affirm someone, you make firm. You give them a foundation that is solid, that they can build on. The other day in church, Andy Stanley made a great statement. In fact, Andy Stanley makes a lot of great statements when he preaches. But the other day when Margaret and I were listening to him, Andy said this. He said, acceptance is the optimal environment for change. And I thought, oh, man, is that powerful. Now, watch this one. Affirmation is the optimal environment for growth. And affirmation is based on action. In other words, not what we think and feel, but what we say and do. So affirmation isn't thinking and feeling. Because a lot of times, don't we think something about somebody and say, boy, I think they do a good job. You know what I mean? We think, oh, they're doing a wonder. Pastor maybe look at a staff member, boy, he or she, they're really helping me. Affirmation is not what I think about you. Affirmation never becomes affirmation until I say this to you. It's an action thing. In other words, you can't keep it inside. To affirm is to let it go out. And I have the statement in your Enjoy Life Club: you will always move toward anyone who increases you and away from anyone who makes you less. Or Samuel Goldwyn said, when someone does something good, applaud. You will make two people happy. When God calls a leader, chooses a leader, he affirms that leader through others. And let me give you an assignment. This is just for you to do on your own. And the assignment is that this week, write a note of affirmation to a leader. Write a note of affirmation to somebody that has ministered to you in an effective way. In fact, after that message that Andy Stanley preached that I just referred to briefly, I sat down and wrote him a note. And I just thanked him for giving me spiritual food and for what his ministry means to me and how he nourishes my spirit and in my soul. And just, scribble a note out. 3 or 4 lines will do it. You don't have to write an epistle. Just get a little note, but do it. Either say it or write it, okay? And I've always believed in writing notes of affirmation because here, words of affirmation are heard but can be forgotten. Notes of affirmation are kept. When a person gets a note of affirmation, many, many times, they'll hold on to that. They'll put that in a desk drawer. They'll put that on a desk and feed off of that. Isn't that true? Okay. When God chooses a leader, number 3, he gives that leader a mentor. Or mentors. I even think I like that better because I think in our culture, I've never been into one mentor. I don't think one person can teach us everything we need to know. I think it's better to pick several that can, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, and so if you have several mentors, you can pull from them. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, our chief one in life is somebody who will make us do what we can. When Moses arrived in Midian, this is in your notes, he was completely unprepared for the sparse life ahead of him. It was Jethro who gave him a family, offering him his daughter Zipporah in marriage. It was Jethro who taught Moses a trade, showing him how to turn the sparse desert vegetation into wool and milk and meat. It was Jethro who taught the skills of survival in that harsh environment, how to find water, where to seek shelter from the Sirocco winds. All these skills would later serve Moses well as he led his huge band of former slaves across the badlands of Sinai. We gain insight into the shrewd mind of Jethro much later in the biblical narrative when he gives Moses some advice that saves Moses from a leader's most dreaded fate, death by administration. In Exodus 18, Jethro came to visit Moses. Verse 9 says, Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done. Jethro was so moved by the Israelites' deliverance that he acknowledged the sovereignty of Yahweh and offered a sacrifice to the true God. But the next day, Jethro grew concerned when he saw Moses take the judgment seat and hear the people's grievances from morning till evening. And when his father-in-law saw this, he took Moses aside and asked, son, why do you alone sit as a judge? You'll burn out if you try to handle it alone. Delegate, man, delegate. Little Maxwell translation there. Okay. Verse 24 says, Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything that he said, and as a result of his advice, we know what happened. Moses set up a judicial system, personally hearing only the most difficult legal cases, and without a mentor, Moses would never have survived, much less been in a position to be mightily used of God. In fact, one of my favorite leadership lessons, I haven't given it probably for 5 years, but I had a leadership lesson I used to give called The Day That Moses Became a Leader. And it was this day that Jethro said, I want you to go from a minister to a leader. I want you to go from hands-on to equipping people. I don't want you to handle all this by yourself. The load is way, way, way too much. In an article out of the Harvard Business Review called Clues for Success in the President's Job, author Joseph Bailey interviewed more than 30 top executives, and he found that they all learned firsthand from a mentor. Somebody that poured their life into them. And by the way, mentors can be through tapes and books, and so don't get this idealistic, I got to go find one person who's going to be my mentor for the rest of my life. That's highly idealistic. But begin to learn and glean. I've got all kind of people. I probably have a dozen people that are mentors of mine that I learn from and I receive from. When God chooses a leader, number 4, here's another wonderful, gracious gift that God gives leaders. When God chooses a leader, he builds on that leader's strengths, experiences, and background. Oh, this is so true. In other words, when he calls you to lead, he doesn't call you for you to take your non-spiritual gifts and use. He wants you to use your spiritual gifts. He wants to play to your strengths. Let me read it, 2 paragraphs. It's not in your notes, but it's out of the book Destiny and Deliverance, on the chapter that I wrote. Growing up in Pharaoh's palace, Moses would have received the finest education that culture could offer. While preparing for leadership in either government or military service, he would have received extensive training in all areas of academics. He would have had early opportunities to lead. He would have learned long-range planning from those whose monuments took centuries to complete. In addition, he would have learned the intricacies of the Egyptian governmental system. He knew who in the courts had the ear of Pharaoh. He knew which branch of government oversaw the massive slave labor force. More importantly, he knew Pharaoh. Without his early training as a grandson of Pharaoh, Moses never would have been able to gain an audience with the Pharaoh. He had been viewed as some crazy shepherd with a bad case of sunstroke and been killed immediately. Yet without his desert training, he wouldn't have lasted a day in the Sinai wasteland. Going back even further, had he not been born a Hebrew slave and his wife, he would have lacked the passion necessary for such an awesome task. So do you see how God prepares a leader? Remember, strengths, experiences, and background. Moses is a Jew. Only a Jewish person is going to have the heart to deliver the Jews. So he was born right.
Please stop the tape at this point and go to side 2 for the conclusion of God's gracious gifts to leaders.
Then he grew up and knows all about Pharaoh and Egypt and the system, so that when he comes to get the people out, he already knows who the influencers are, the courts. He knows all the intricacies. But they spent 4 years out on the desert. Why? Because that's exactly where he's taken the people. In other words, God, in his sovereign plan, knew that Moses needed every one of these training experiences so that when he had the opportunity to lead, when his time came, he would truly be ready. I remember as a kid, I think every kid that grows up in the church has one of these kind of thoughts. I know as a kid, I was always kind of afraid of God's will because I thought that God's will meant that I'd have to do something I didn't want to do. And the thing that I didn't want to do, this is going to show how unspiritual I am, but I mean, you already know it, so I might as well talk about it. One of the things, I didn't want to go to the mission field. So, oh dear God, do not call me to be a missionary. And I mean, because I thought, if you know me, I can't do anything with my hands. I would be a worthless missionary, truly. But I'm saying, oh God, don't call me. Okay, yes, Lord, I'll do your will. But you're all the time you're saying, don't you dare call me over there. Well, thank God he didn't call me. You know why he didn't call me in the mission field? Because I don't have strengths that would allow me to be a great missionary. I wouldn't be a good missionary. You see, he calls us where our strengths are. What we're fitted for. In fact, the unhappiest people in ministry are people that are doing ministry where their spiritual gifts do not complement that ministry. If you want to find out where burnout is, that's why I've always said, as a leader, we're always to take our people out of their comfort zone, but as a leader, we're never to take them out of their gift zone. Keep them in their gift zone. Don't stretch them and put them, if you can't teach, don't put them in a Sunday school class and say, God will appreciate your faithfulness. Well, I'm going to tell you why you're being faithful. You're boring the whole class. You're faithful, all right. You started with 12 and now you got 1, and it's you. Don't take them out of their gift mix. You see, when God calls a leader, He says, "Okay, I'm going to put you where you belong. I'm going to take your experiences. I'm going to take your background. I'm going to take your strengths. I'm going to take your natural talents. I'm going to take your spiritual gifts, and I'm going to put you right there." You know, that's when I'm with Bill Hybels all the time. He's always talking about, here's the thought: why don't we put people with the gift of teaching into teaching? People with the gift of administrating into administrating, and those who, you know, I'm saying, and those with the gift of leadership, let them lead. He says that's a real foreign thought to the church. But all he's saying is play to their strengths, play to what they do well. And so I did a little deal just for us to ask ourselves. It's already in your notes. What are my spiritual gifts? Do they fit my ministry? What are my strengths? Does it fit my ministry? Background. Does it fit my ministry? My experiences, my opportunities. What do I love to do? Does it fit my ministry? What do I do well? What do others say that I do well? All these, does it fit my ministry? Have I done it well in the past? Is this an area where I'm sensing growth in my life? And everything should be matching up with what your ministry is at this point. You see, when I do what I'm doing, teaching leadership, like I'm doing right now in the Enjoy Life Club lesson, when I go this afternoon and tomorrow and spend all day with 1,000, 1,200 church leaders and teach leadership, can I tell you something? I'm right in my element. I mean, I'm doing things that I love. I'm doing it with people that I love, for a cause that I love. And I mean, it's not a strain on me. It's not like pressure on me. It's not like, oh man, I got to go do this. It's instead of, oh man, I got to go do this, I say, oh, I get to do this. It's a whole different feel because I'm playing again to my strengths, experiences, and what my background is. Number 5. When God chooses a leader, He often refines that leader's character in obscurity. Again, let me read. It's not in your notes, a couple paragraphs from the chapter in the Destiny and Deliverance book. I've often wondered why God chose to send Moses to the desert for 40 long years before using him to lead the Hebrews' liberation. While he did learn the ways of the desert, that was most likely not the entire reason. God could just have easily sent someone to Moses who could have served as a scout across Sinai, like in those old westerns where the old grizzled scout led settlers safely over the plains. There's something unique about the leader whose early experience was gleaned in obscurity over many years. In that respect, leaders are like lumber. If a carpenter needs a 2x4 stud to frame a wall with a fast-growing cheap softwood like yellow pine, that will do nicely. But for a fine piece of furniture like a dining room table, one that must be able to withstand decades of use and abuse, only a fine-grained hardwood like oak or maple or hickory will do. Like that oak tree, the leader who has grown slowly but surely over the years has a strength and resilience not found in those for whom success comes too easily or too quickly. You know what I'm saying here? I'm saying that when God raises a leader, He microwaves the leader, or he crockpots the leader, not microwaves the leader. We've got enough microwave leaders.
Yeah, that's good.
Stick them in the microwave, push a few numbers, zap them out, they come. They got a diploma, we think we've got something. We need a crockpot leaders. It needs to take time. There needs to be that simmering process that comes out. It comes out right. Tim Hansel, in his book, You Got to Keep Dancing, says we have two choices when we hit adverse trials. They can break us or we can break them. Not surprisingly, some of the great achievements of men and women in the past have been achieved by those suffering the fires of personal adversity, the determination, insight to do what others have not done. The book Pilgrim's Progress was not written from a pleasant mountain getaway, but from a dingy British jail cell that became home for John Bunyan. Florence Nightingale did not reorganize the hospitals of England from a top-flight, lushy, decorated health management office. She managed to do it while bedridden herself. Pasteur was semi-paralyzed, but still attacking other diseases. American historian Francis Parker suffered so terribly that he could work no more than 5 minutes at a time, yet he managed to turn out 20 classic volumes of history. When God calls a leader and chooses a leader, He's going to put that leader in some kind of an obscure, out-of-the-way place to do the character refinement. How many times in teaching leadership I've talked about my starting out in Hillham, Indiana. I mean, that says it all. You just think of Hillham and you know it's obscure. Huh? I mean, it's more obscure than, what is it, Blazing Saddles? Not Blazing Saddles, Texas. What was it? Gun Barrel City. Talk about getting your character refined when you're in Gun Barrel City. That would do it, wouldn't it? Huh? I mean, refined or shot, one of the two, I guess. I mean, you go to Hillham. I mean, when I went to Hillham, I moved 5 hours from my parents. All right, Blazing Saddle, empty gun deal, big barrel deal. Hey, it's all, it's all Texas, it's all cowboy, it's all the wild, wild west. But when you go to Hillham, what are you going to do in Hillham? I mean, think about it. There's 11 houses, 2 garages, a country store. I can still remember sitting on a pile of dirt when we were building our building and having no place to take the dirt and having no money to move it. And knowing that I had to do something with it, sitting on the pile of dirt all Saturday afternoon, praying and crying, saying, God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Obscurity. The whole issue of being away from my family, my father, who was my mentor, no real close churches of my denomination all around, being in a culture that was farming, rural, backwoodsy, conservative. But I can tell you, much of the stuff that I am today was birthed in me in Hillham, Indiana. In fact, when I went back for my 25th anniversary a couple of years ago, when 25 years ago we built that church in Hillham, they had me come back. The message I preached on Sunday morning were 10 lessons I learned at Hillham. And the whole message, I talked about, here's what I learned here. Here's what you deposited in my life. Here's what God gave me in Hillham, Indiana. Hey, don't despise your youth, Paul tells Timothy. But don't despise small places either. You're listening to this tape, Pastor, and you're in Gun City, Texas. Why would they say city? Town it should be. You're in some little old place in Texas or New Mexico, or you're saying, dear God, what am I doing here? I tell you what you're doing here. You're getting formed into a leader after God's choosing. Look at the Word of God. Look at Jesus himself, born in a stable. The whole process of where we are today, and don't get in any hurry to get out of where you are. Don't get in any hurry. Don't say, well, oh my goodness, I've been here for 3 years in Hillham. Got to get out, go somewhere else. I got to move on. Don't get in any hurry. Just stay where you are until God finishes doing the work in your life. I love the sign that I read one time that said, Lord. It was a sign that said, Lord, the fire and not the scrap heap. And when Lord, the fire and not the scrap heap. And what this is taken from a blacksmith who said, and I read, when I pick up a piece of metal, in order to make it something useful, I must put it into the fire. And when it is hot, red hot, I take it out and I begin to hammer on it and continue to hammer it until it is made into a useful article. But unless I put it into the fire, I must throw it out onto the scrap heap. It's either the fire or the scrap heap. I'm either putting it where I can form it and make it a useful tool, which always has to go to the fire. So when you're in the fire, don't worry about it. God's just forming you. He's just forming you. And if you're not in the fire, so I don't like the fire. Then he says, well, then I got to throw you over here on the scrap heap. Got to put you over. It's a discarding deal. Okay, when God chooses a leader, number 6, he instills in that leader the value of hard work. He really does. Because I've never seen a ministry built the easy way. I've never seen this shortcut to success in ministry. 39 easy ways to build a church. Never seen a book on that. You know what I mean? There's no easy way. If you're going, you can tell you're in trouble if you're going downhill, because success is uphill all the way. So it's like pastor will come and say, "Can me?" The other day I had a pastor coming to me and say, "Okay," he said, "Tell me what's the one thing I need to learn how to lead? I said, one thing? He said, yes, sir. He said, condense it all down. What's the one thing? Because he said, whatever you tell me what that one thing is, I'm going to do that one thing so I can be a leader. There's not one thing. Boy, I wish that there were one thing. You know, it's 27 different things that you've got to put under your belt, or at least it's 21 laws of leadership. It's not one law, and not one law. You do one law, I say, hey, I got it down now. Or, tell me the easy way to build this church. The easy way? I don't think there is any way. Like my friend Nancy Dornan said one time, she said, the longest distance between 2 points is a shortcut. And shortcuts don't pay off in the long run. Recently, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee, speaking for Promise Keepers. And whenever you speak for Promise Keepers, they always give the assignment to me or to whoever's speaking. So they wanted me to talk about the man in the workplace. And so I preached a message in Knoxville, Promise Keepers, a couple of months ago called, Take This Job and Love It. And what I said in the message, and take this job and love it, is what I put in your notes. To love what you do and feel that it matters, how could anything be more fun? That's what the Ecclesiastes writer wrote when he said, For my heart rejoiced in all my labor. The way to get to the top is to get off your bottom. Huh? Proverbs 6:9. How long will you lie down, old sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? And it's not what a man does that determines whether his work is sacred or secular. It's why he does it. Whatsoever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men. It is the Lord Christ that you are serving. So I talked about that. Well, all I know is that when God chooses a leader, can I tell you something? He doesn't choose lazy people. If you're a lazy person, can I tell you something? God can't use lazy people. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. When you put your hand to the plow, you don't turn back. Who was it? Was it a person one time that talked to one of the great missionaries and asked him to pray? I think it was a person that was asking the great man of faith in England to pray for them, that they wouldn't be lazy, that they wouldn't sleep in. And the great man of faith said to us, George Mueller. George Mueller looked at him and said, look, he said, I'll tell you what, you get both feet out of the bed and start walking, and then I'll start praying. So many, many times we want God to do something for us we should do for ourselves. God doesn't have room for lazy people in his kingdom. This is eternal big stuff that we're doing. And when he chooses a leader, choose somebody that's willing to work hard. Number 7, the 7th wonderful gift that he gives leaders is that he sustains that leader with a powerful vision. That's the sustaining strength of a leader, that powerful vision. And again, in your notes out of the book, long before the Hebrew slaves heard the sustaining vision of God's liberating plans for them, Moses heard of the promised land directly from the mouth of God. Exodus 3:8. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and with honey. God gives the leader a vision. That's what sustains the leader in the organization. Vision is the world's most desperate need. There are no hopeless situations, only people who think hopelessly. That's why Proverbs 29:18 says, where there's no vision, the people perish. And before any group ever finds direction and hope in a vision, God must first captivate the heart of a leader with that vision. Wow. That's what brings us through. That's what keeps Moses keeping on when it gets rough and the children of Israel are grumbling and complaining against him and against God and against the leadership. It's the vision. It's the vision that keeps him there. I was so thrilled. A few weeks ago, I was out in San Diego, and I was able to go out to the new property where Skyline is relocating, and they're now clearing the land and the bulldozing. And Jim Garland and I went out there. In fact, I got on a bulldozer, and they did some videoing of me. That was a real joke. That's another story in itself. But I thought to myself, it's the vision of the land that has sustained that church. It's the vision of the land that has allowed the leadership baton to go from me to Jim, and that church just to keep on growing and keep on prospering. It's that vision. It's the same vision that God gave Moses that allowed Joshua to finally get him into the promised land. You know, what's God say to Joshua? Moses is dead. All right. Get on over there to the land that I promised the people. You see, what was Joshua able to do? Joshua was able to stand on the shoulders of Moses. It goes back to that quote that I love so well. There is no success without sacrifice. If today you receive success, it's because somebody yesterday sacrificed for that success. And if today you are sacrificing and not seeing success, it means tomorrow another leader will have that success. Standing on the shoulders. I love this quote that I just recently came to. There's a wonderful book that I'm reading right now, Giants of the Faith, and it's a wonderful book. But one of the saints, Bernard, here's what he said: "We are like dwarfs seated on the shoulders of giants." Oh, I love this. "We see more things than the ancients, things more distant, but it is due neither to the sharpness of our sight nor the greatness of our stature. It is simply because they have lent us their own." In other words, I'm standing on the shoulders of everybody that's gone on before me. Hey, I ought to see more than they ever saw. I ought to be able to do more than I've ever been able to do, because I'm standing on their shoulders. You're standing on their shoulders. When God chooses a leader, number 8, he brings others alongside that leader to compensate for his weaknesses. 3 paragraphs. When God tells Moses, it's in your notes, about the plan that he has for him, Moses cannot envision himself leading in this great endeavor because he is so self-conscious about his own weaknesses. Now, we know this well. Exodus 4:10. While still on Mount Horeb, he argues with God, "O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." Even after God promises Moses, "I will help you speak and will teach you what to say," Moses remains unconvinced. Finally, God reveals that Moses' brother Aaron will speak on Moses' behalf. Later, God provides hundreds of leaders to labor alongside of Moses, most notably Joshua, Aaron, and Hur. Had Aaron and Hur not been there literally holding up the arms of Moses in Exodus 17, Joshua and his army would not have been able to defeat the Amalekites. What am I saying? When God chooses a leader, he brings people around that leader to complement that leader's weaknesses. As a leader, I have some tremendous strengths, but as a leader, I also have some real blind spots and have some major weaknesses. I'm not a real balanced person. And so therefore, for example, administration, the details of life, the closing the door. I don't like to close the door. I like to open doors. So who do I have around me? Almost all of my key players are door closers. Because what I do is I come through and I see opportunity and I seize it and I envision and I create and I do all this stuff, and I'm a leader that's always way out there on the front edge. And so I've got all these key players around there. We know what they're doing? They're closing the door. You know why? Because they realize if they don't conserve what I create, it'll be lost. And I couldn't make it without them. I think of the management team that I have around me. I have a great management team. And I think of how they, day by day, day in, day out, run things for me. You know, God has blessed us. I was blown away the other day when Robin Small we were having dinner together with our Enjoy team in one of our conferences, and she's been with us for 4 years. And she said, "John, you realize when I'm celebrating my 4th anniversary with Enjoy?" I said, "Oh, that's so wonderful, Robin." She said, "Do you realize when I came 4 years ago, you had 10 people that were employees of Enjoy?" I said, "Robin, you're kidding me." I mean, I just took me back. It caught me. I thought, because today we have 128. And it's just, we'll have 200 within another 12 months to 16 months. And it just blows me away. I say, man, how could this happen? Well, it's that the team that I have that manages. I travel and speak and create and write. I mean, Dick Peterson, right on down. These guys, day in, day out, they run that organization. They make sure it's got excellence. They make sure that it's done right. Well, I couldn't make it without them. There's no way. The other day, this is another story I could tell another time. But the other day I was on a plane with Isaiah Thomas, and we were talking. he was asking me questions about leadership. And he's done really well. He's got a wonderful company himself, and he's done very well. And he said, John, he said, what's the difference between management and leadership? And I said, the difference between management and leadership is very simple. I said, management assumes everything will stay the same. Leadership assumes everything will change. And there's a world, and those two worlds are very far apart. But what would I do without my management team? What would I do without my technology team? All of my computer people, the people that do things that I don't know how to do at all, that I'm totally ignorant of and not any good at all. And they come around me and they make up all the difference. Now, what I'm saying is, when I look at where I am today, today, the blessings of God are almost totally the result of the team that I have around me. And when God chooses a leader, he not only chooses that leader, but he chooses other people to come and support that leader. And by the way, Pastor, as you're listening to this tape, listen to me very carefully. You've got people in your church that God wants you to bring around. Be secure. Don't be insecure. Don't keep them away. Don't push them down. Let them use their gifts. Let them compliment. Be honest with your people. Tell them what you don't do well. Bring people. Hire staff to complement your weaknesses. That's what you want to do. But it all begins with a secure base. And don't be afraid to admit, I don't do that well. I'm not any good at that. But first of all, Pastor, let me tell you something. Your people already know you're not any good at it. You're not only insecure, you're stupid. Well, I don't want to let anybody see my weaknesses. They already see your weaknesses. They see my weaknesses. The only difference between you and me, I have more than you. That's okay. The weaknesses are not what hurts you. It's your unwillingness to complement weaknesses with other people's strengths that hurt you. Remember that. It's not what you can't do. It's what you're unwilling to allow people around you to do what you can't do that hurts you in the whole process. And when they do it well, brag on them. Let them know that you wouldn't make it without them, because you wouldn't make it without them. It's like back in the old days when they had the old pump organs, where one person had to pump the air into the organ, and the organist was given a recital, and at the intermission time, the guy that was doing all the pumping the air went to the organist and said, boy, he said, we're giving a good concert, aren't we? The organist said, what do you mean, we? I'm the organist. The guy never said anything, so we got ready for the second half and started pressing those keys. There wasn't anything happening. There's no air being pumped. The guy was just sitting behind the organ. Kind of goes around the back and says, yes, he said, we do need to give a good concert, don't we? It's a two-person deal, no question about that. Number 9, when God chooses a leader, he provides that leader with all the tools he will need. As Moses evaluated the immensity of the task when God was calling him to take on, no doubt his mind was trying to ascertain the resources at his disposal. Now, this is incredible. I have no influence with Pharaoh anymore. Worse, he said, I'm a fugitive. Well, let's see. The Hebrews, he said, don't even know me. They don't have any reason to trust my leadership. No army, no support personnel. Lord, just exactly how am I supposed to accomplish this emancipation expedition with no tools, no help, and no influence? God did not give Moses what he expected. He gave him what was essential. That's a very important statement. God did not give Moses what he expected. He gave him what was essential. The first resource that he gave to Moses was that of the mysterious introduction. Tell them, I am has sent me to you. Moses wasn't so sure about that cryptic name and what if it would do the trick. What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? The Lord gave Moses a second resource. His shepherd's staff now had supernatural powers, and that staff became a powerful symbol of things to come from Moses. In addition to the revelation of God's name in the staff, as a symbol of his power, God gave Moses a promise. He said, I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. And against the odds, God would triumph in spite of their wealth, power, and dominance. In spite of Pharaoh's hardened heart, in spite of their occultic oppression, they would be liberated. He gives us the tools that we need. So I sat down the other day and I asked myself, what is needed to succeed in ministry? I'm going to give you 10 things. The first 5 is a God thing. Number 1, a calling. I think we need a calling to succeed in this ministry. I don't think this is an option. I don't think this is a chosen profession. I don't think this is something that we one day, because we like people, decided to do. A calling. Number 2, spiritual giftedness. If we're going to be successful, we have to be gifted in the areas that we're called to do. And number 3, God's hand upon us. In other words, we need the hand of God, the favor of God to be upon us if we're going to succeed. And 4, we need the favor of the people. We need to have the favor of the people until they believe in what our vision is and come with us. And number 5, we need a passion for ministry. Now, those first 5 that I give you are what I call a God thing. Only God can give you a calling and spiritual giftedness and place his hand on you and give you and me favor with people and give us a passion for ministry. All that is a God thing. But there are 5 other things we need. And these are practical things. We need training. We need to know how to do this job well. Number 7, we need resources. We need books, tapes, videos, programs, things that work. Number 8, a strategy. We need to sit down and process how we're going to grow the church. Number 9, we need to develop a team. We need to develop a team to make us successful. And finally, number 10, we need a partnership. And we need a partnership because here's what I believe about the 21st century, and I'm going to close with this thought, 60 seconds, and I'm done. I believe that ministry is getting tougher, not easier. The fallout is becoming much greater. And I believe going into the 21st century, if we're going to really succeed, we're going to need to have somebody that walks alongside of us as a friend and a partner. That's why I love the idea that's happening across America today of churches coming together. And Gerald, one of the things I like about this group today is pastors from this town and this area have come together for the Enjoy Life lesson. But I know your heart is very ecumenical in the fact of coming together as churches and pastors and let's do it together. We've fought long enough. The other church is not the enemy. The evil one is the enemy. We've got to figure this out after a while. And I love this coming together and this bridge building, alliance mindset that's happened to the church. And it's true, as we come together, we're going to be able to do so much more. But pastors, if we're going to succeed in the 21st century, we're going to have a partner. I can remember going back to Hillham one more time in this lesson. I can still remember when I wanted to do a stewardship month. But I didn't know how to do a stewardship month. All I knew is my people needed to learn how to do it. And I didn't know. And I remember going to the Bedford Bible Bookstore in Bedford, Indiana, and looking for something on stewardship and finding nothing. And coming back, and Margaret and I sitting in our garage and thinking stewardship thoughts. They weren't good thoughts, folks. It was just, I'm a 22-year-old pastor that I don't have a clue, but I know that my people need to learn stewardship. And I can still remember us getting cardboard and painting the cardboard. Margaret's a teacher, so she's kind of crafty, and then putting statements on cardboard on different color. I had orange and blue, so ugly, it was awful. You can't even imagine how bad it was. I'd give $1,000 to have those cardboards back just to show them to you so you could see how far God can bring somebody. I had 8 of them, 4 on one side, 4 statements on one side, 4 on the other side. And I remember preaching on stewardship, going around pointing to this statement and saying, this is a true statement. And, these farmers taking these notes. I mean, I'm telling you. But I'm going to tell you something. When I started at Hillham, didn't know where to go. Didn't know who to go to. Didn't have anybody putting the resources. And I kept saying, there's got to be someone who provides pastors with resources. There's got to be somebody that gives them a tool. There's got to be somebody that comes along. And I say that to close with, and all the gracious gifts that God has given us, and I gave you 9 that he gave Moses, that he gives us. One of the gracious gifts that God gave me, and it's a gift, and I know it is he gave me the ability to take an issue, a problem, a situation, and be able to figure it out, and then be able to develop a tool and a resource to fix that problem. I found this out in Hillham. Because I couldn't find what I needed, I started developing what I needed. And it wasn't real good, but it was better than anything I was not finding. So I gave it my best shot. Little did I know that was the seed of me doing videos and tapes and books and resources all throughout these years. Little did I know that was the seed that was planted. Now, here's what I want to say in closing. Enjoy is going to an entire new level. The Enjoy Group, and when I speak of that, I'm not only talking about Equip or nonprofit organization, but Enjoy Management Services, Enjoy Stewardship Services, and Enjoy, as you know it, seminars, resources, etc. We're getting ready to go to the greatest level we've ever gone. We right now are strategically over the next 6 months planning very much of how we can partner with pastors in a whole new level. It's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we're prepared to do it. Because I believe going into the 21st century, what pastors are going to need more than anyone else is somebody that really does look after their interest and really does want to provide for them resources and tools and strategy for the next century. I tell you that because next month, I probably have taught 165 to 170 Enjoy Life Club tapes. But I want to promise you something. Next month, I'm going to do a tape called The Power of Partnership. Trust me, it'll be the most important tape I've ever given. The most important lesson I've ever taught, I'm about to teach. How I'm going to do it is I'm going to do it live. And I'm bringing in every staff member. I'm asking them to bring in their family. I want their family to hear this lesson, so that when their husband or their wife or their kids or their dads go to work, they understand why we do what we do and the price that we're going to pay to get it to this level. But church leader, next month when you get the tape, The Power of Partnership, do me a favor. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, the first opportunity you have, sit and listen to this tape. Because I'm going to share with you 10 ways that partnership will add value to your life. And it's going to be, I think, one of those lessons that God really helps me. So I'm looking forward to that. Let's pray. Father, I want to thank you so much for allowing me to be with Gerald and his people and the pastors here in the North Dallas area. I want to thank you for the gifts that you've given us. You have been gracious. You have blessed us abundantly. Every good and perfect gift comes from you. May this lesson be a lesson that encourages church leaders. Whether they're listening to the tape in the office with maybe some of the other staff and people around the table, or they're in their car and listening to it just by themselves. God, I pray that every one of us will now focus on not what we do not have, but because of your grace, what we do have. And none of us are facing odds as high as the odds that Moses faced. But the gifts that you gave Moses helped him to overcome, and the gifts that you give us will help us to overcome. So may your grace be given to every person that listens to this lesson, and may courage to do the impossible with the help of God be placed within every person's fiber. I pray in your name. Amen.